being here singing those songs of peace and love and harmony and hope. It does take me aback as I sit here and listen and think that there are churches in this community who actually are celebrating the wars that are and the devastation and violence in the Middle East because they think it's going to bring you-know-who back. It's going to bring on the Armageddon. It's going to bring on the end times. And so we actually have folks, I know that we talk about the religious extremism over in the Middle East that is part of the undergirding of creating this conflict that's happening over there. But to think that we have religious people right here, that people we work with and people that we know who believe that this is a good thing, part of God's plan, part of bringing back the world. And that's why I'm so thankful to have this place. Because one of the problems in religion is there's no quality control. Wait and see what a world it can be if we care, if we share, you and me. Now, after a week of devastating news coming out of Israel and Gaza, we can find ourselves wondering, what can I do in the midst of such horrific violence and destruction? Someone said to me this week, I don't watch the news. I have enough to manage just in my own life. Watching the news fills me with anxiety and dread about things that I have no control over. So I just don't watch. And I respect that choice for that person. But as for me, I'm drawn to know what's happening in the world. I've been to both Israel and Gaza. And I'm ethnically Jewish on my father's side of the family. And like every other Jew in the world right now, we're just one or two steps removed from somebody who either was killed in the terrorist massacre and atrocities that happened last week over there, or one step removed from somebody who's been called up to go fight in the war now that is going to ensue. I have reached out to my Jewish and my Muslim colleagues here in Oklahoma to let them know that we, as a community of All Souls, send our condolences to them and our support in the days and weeks ahead. I told them that we are very aware that incidents of anti-Semitism and incidents of Islamophobia are often fueled by these moments here at home. And I told them if they experience any hate or prejudice or violence against their community, that I'm ready, and I think our congregation, I speak for all of us, are ready to stand with them against any of that might happen. I've offered our church as a neutral location if they want to do any kind of vigil or any kind of press conference or dialogue, which we've been able to provide that kind of a space. With no overt symbols here, with knowing that our membership has people with Jewish heritage, Muslim heritage, Christian heritage, and others. It can be truly a house of prayer for all people, and we've been a place in times like this for our community, and I'm very thankful for that. So thank you for being a congregation that has stood with our Jewish and our Muslim neighbors in times of threat and terrorism. The terrorist attacks by the Hamas fighters in Israel, killing civilians last week, were atrocious, were indefensible. Nothing morally justifies the use of such violence. I'm also horrified by the efforts to stop Hamas, which is now leading to mass deaths of Palestinians, civilians, and children as well. It is a tragedy of epic proportions. Let us continue to be among those radiant faces who in times of trouble sing songs of love and who in the dissonance of war declare a gospel of peace. So even though there may be little that we can do to create peace in the Middle East, we can create peace within ourselves, and we can share that with the people around us, and that really matters, especially at a time like this, because we all are on edge. We all get kind of anxious. And with that in mind, I want to shift back to what I said at the beginning, what a world it could be if we care, if we share, you and me. So in it, I want to tell you about an act of nonviolent liberation in my home this week, when my teenage daughter protested her bedtime. I'll spare you the details, but my conclusion is now that she's a teenager, instead of being enforcers of a specific bedtime, I want to help her to realize that being tired all day is not fun, so that she will hopefully want to get to bed at a reasonable hour. So why am I telling you about this today? It's because I'm going to talk about generosity, but I don't want to try to convince you to be generous and to share and to care. I want you to figure out that generosity enhances your life and your own well-being. There are lots of ways, of course, to be generous. That generosity is not just about giving money. It's also about giving people the benefit of the doubt. It's also about being forgiving. It's a way of being generous. It's about being willing to try to understand another person's point of view. Generosity is a key to living a fulfilling, healthy, balanced life. What a joy to have something to give, to have enough to be able to give something else to someone else. I think it's one of life's greatest joys, to be able to help someone else have the opportunity to do something while also taking care of ourselves. Hey, you want half of my popsicle? Those were words that I would love to say or hear when I was a kid, because generosity just is something that feels good. Now, we used to learn at a young age that it made us happy to give and to share. Now, when it comes to giving money, that can be the hardest kind of giving or generosity to talk about. Money has such a hold on our psyches, such a hold on our spirits. It's something that we all deal with every day of our lives. It has the power to destroy families and relationships and careers, and it does that all the time. Our feelings about money are complicated. It can cause people to cheat, steal, lie, manipulate, feel self-important, play hurtful games, and take enormous risks. Nations go to war over money and resources. If you're alive, then you most definitely have been hurt, slighted, manipulated, tempted, scared about, or puffed up by money at some point in your life. I think I've experienced all of those. Hurt, slighted, manipulated, tempted, scared about, and puffed up by money. This thing that we call money has such a hold on us that most of us don't even like talking about it, and we especially don't like preachers talking about it. Now, in part, that's because most of us like our money and material things, and we don't want to part with them. I mean, that's how I feel. I like money as much as anybody, but there are two main questions about money that we all think about. Will I have enough for tomorrow? And am I doing what I should be doing with what I have today? The parable of Lazarus and the rich man in the Bible is a really good teaching to help us wrap our heads around these two questions. Now, I know, if you know the story, you might be thinking, what is all this talk about heaven and hell and sitting at the bosom of Abraham? How can we really take this story seriously? And I'll say, yes, we can take this story seriously. We're just not supposed to take it literally. It's not a historic account of something that actually happened. It's a teaching story. It's a parable that's been passed down and shared in order to teach us a higher principle. And from that standpoint, these are wise stories. And let's look at this one for a moment as it is written in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, starting on verse 19. It says, "There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day." Now, of course, to us, a rich man, we think of a multimillionaire being someone who is rich these days. But all the story really says is that he had nice clothes and he ate well every day. That could be me and perhaps you. There are way too many people in Oklahoma and around the world who don't have enough to eat every day. But at lunch, most of us, our biggest concern is, what of the many choices do I want to eat today? And if you're like me, you might even be counting your calories and hoping not to get so many of the darn things right now. So in the story, we learn that at the rich man's gate, there's a poor man named Lazarus, whose body is full of sores. So we know that not only does Lazarus lack money and food, but he's also in bad health. All Lazarus is asking for are the scraps that fall from the rich man's table. Eventually, Lazarus dies, and we're told that he ascends with angels to the bosom of Abraham. Now, that sounds like a real improvement over lying in the dirt, eating scraps, and having your sores licked by wild dogs, which it also says is happening. I think I would have to say that the expression, "he's in a better place," was probably invented for just such a situation. Now, next we learn that the rich man dies. And instead of ascending to heaven to sit with Abraham, he descends to the fiery torments of Hades. To make it worse, the rich man can see up into heaven. And he spots Lazarus up there with old Abe. They're chilling, probably having a cold beverage, some lazy boy chairs, or whatever heaven looks like to you. We get the impression that Lazarus is wanting for nothing, right? Lazarus, who's up there with Abraham. But we also learned that those in hell can talk to those in heaven. It's a good thing to know, because the rich man asks Abraham if he will let Lazarus simply dip his finger in water to cool his tongue. But he's denied this simple humanitarian request. Now, it's not as if one dipped finger in water is going to do much to quench an eternally dry thirst. Not to mention, as Randy mentioned last Sunday, how could anyone enjoy heaven if you're having to look and listen to all those people being tormented down in hell? Now remember, these parables are not meant to be taken literally, right? They're written to teach us a higher principle. So what is the point? Some people think it's a story that teaches that rich people won't get to heaven, but that doesn't check out because Abraham was rich and he's sitting pretty up there. So being wealthy is not the lesson of the story. This is a story that's meant to teach us something that all people, regardless of how much money we have in our bank account, can learn. In part, it's trying to answer the question, if money talks, then what does it say about you? Think about it. We know what Lazarus needs at the beginning of the story. He needs food to eat. He needs medicine. He needs a shelter over his head, and he needs some clothes to cover his body. But what does the rich man need? What is the rich man lacking? We know from the story that the rich man has his needs met and then some. But no matter what we have, there's always more that we could have. Right? And that's why it's foolish to try to find our life's satisfaction in material things, because we'll never be satisfied with money or material things, as great as they are, as nice as they are to have, because of those things, enough is never enough. In material things, we can find lots of pleasures, we can meet our basic needs, but we cannot find deep and real satisfaction. What does the rich man need? For one thing, the rich man needs opportunities for sharing his gifts, including his wealth. That's what the teachings of Jesus say. That's what the teachings of all the world's religions repeatedly teach. They say, share your gifts, share of your time, share of your talents, share of your treasures, share of your passion. That's what makes life worth living. Don't keep them for yourself. So just as Lazarus needed food and medicine to be healthy and whole, those who have enough need to share in order to be whole. Our well-being is based on our ability to share of what we have. The wise of all ages have taught that it is not in getting, but it is in giving that our lives are fulfilled. Now, one minister wrote about this, and he used the term fundamental neighborliness. And he says that fundamental neighborliness is a barometer of the soul. I like that term. It's an indication of the attitude of one's heart. So our generosity is a barometer of our soul. It is an indication of the attitude of our heart. In that sense, if we give but do so begrudgingly, it's a barometer of the attitude of our heart. Giving to something or someone that we believe in or something that we care about should feel good. What a joy to have something to give, to make this world a better place, to make this world reflect the values that we care about. What a joy to be able to help another person, another creature, to have some opportunity that they wouldn't be able to have if it weren't for our generosity in some way. But giving itself is not simple or without problems. A gift between family members can sometimes lead to a break in the relationship. Our generosity committee at All Souls, they spend a lot of time vetting the organizations that we give our offering plate to because they want to make sure that these organizations are doing the work and that this is money well spent. It's not always easy to be generous in the right way. Some people are too generous. Some people are not generous enough. In her book, My Grandfather's Blessings, Rachel Naomi Remen tells a story about her friend's 6-year-old boy, who she often played with when she came to visit. They'd played with his 2 Hot Wheels cars, which was the toy that all 6-year-olds loved back then. Sometimes she'd have the one with the chip in its wheel, and sometimes he would. They'd race them around the windowsills and across the floor and all around the house. The boy's parents didn't have much in the way of money. And at one point, Rachel gave the boy a present of about 20 Hot Wheels cars. The next time she came to visit, he'd stop playing with Hot Wheels altogether. Rachel asked him what happened, and the boy said in a soft, quivering voice, "I don't know how to love this many cars, Rachel." She realized at that moment that many people have more than they can love. Another of her friends who was battling cancer came away with a similar lesson. This woman had a nice house. She had lots of things. But before her cancer, she'd often felt a sense of emptiness. And she often tried to fill it by buying more things. The sense of lack never seemed to go away. And then, while she was in the hospital getting treatments, someone brought her one of her bathrobes from her home. One afternoon, while walking in the hospital hallway, she felt herself overwhelmed with gratitude for the robe. Before that, she'd never noticed what a nice robe it was. It was one of 5 in her closet. And so she'd never thought much of it before. So when the woman finished her treatments, she had an enormous garage sale, and she sold off a great deal of her stuff. She came to realize that she had so much stuff in drawers and cabinets and closets that she didn't even know half of the stuff that she had. Even in her phone book, half of the people were people that she didn't really even know. Most of them never sent her cards or came to visit when she was fighting for her life. Before long, she had much less stuff and knew fewer people, but she no longer felt empty. Material things cannot ultimately fill us. Maybe we need to have just as much as we can love. Reading that story reminded me of times when I felt lacking in my life. Times when I felt like I didn't have enough. I've come to realize in those times when I feel like I have some lack, I'm comparing myself to others or whatever creates that, is when I have to be the most generous. Because acts of generosity, when we're feeling deprived or empty, have an amazing result. Using the language of the barometer of the soul, when the attitude of our heart is feeling lacking or fearful about not having enough, an authentic act of generosity can be like medicine to the heart because it feeds the soul. The act itself transfigures fear into love. Try it sometime. When you are feeling a sense of scarcity or lack in your life or fear of not having enough, perform some act of generosity for someone and watch what happens inside you. Not to mention what happens to the one who's the recipient of your generosity. Giving should feel good. I always tell people that, especially around this time of year when we're doing the pledge campaign and everything. It should feel good. You put it down a number, you're like, well, I'm so glad that I could do this for the church to create this community. If it doesn't feel good and you're giving, pay attention to that feeling as a barometer of your soul, as an indication of the attitude of your heart, and ask why. We may not have much control over events happening all over the world, but we do have a chance to make a difference here for each other, to make this community a better place. What a world it can be if we care, if we share, you and me. So go be a generous person, not because you want to live at the bosom of Abraham, but because it will make you and our world and our community more whole. That's all I got on generosity. Let's do it.